It's not being over dramatic to say that China is preparing for war with the US in every aspect, whether it's economically, whether it's militarily, we're seeing everything that they're doing. They have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have more air defense systems than we do. They are much further along with hypersonic missiles. They just came out with the 5th generation fighter jet. And, how did they get it? By stealing our intellectual property. They've stolen $600 billion of intellectual property from us every year, and America's doing nothing about it.
Hey everyone, I told you we were going to have a very, very special guest. Today we have presidential candidate Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina. She's done an incredible job there twice over, and she was the ambassador to the United Nations. And that is where I first noticed her and thought, wow, she was just so brilliant. She was so brilliant the way she handled the UN, and anyone who can handle the UN the way she did and hold the UN to task and our, including our adversaries, is somebody that I knew would have a huge political future. And she certainly does. And somebody who I very much respect. So I'm so grateful that she has taken the time to be with all of you here on the Sara Carter Show, because this is one of the most important and most significant presidential races in modern U.S. history. I absolutely believe that. We can see what is happening across the globe, what is happening in our own nation. We are certainly facing some very dire times, but I believe that if you and I together, right, just as Nikki Haley is doing her job to fight for America, that you and I together can do the same thing by putting the right people in office. And she is here to tell you why. She is the right person for the presidency of the United States of America. So we're going to hear her out. And I'm telling you, you are going to be just blown away with her vast knowledge and capability of handling some of the most, I think, some of the most dangerous crises that we are seeing right now in present time, particularly with China and our border. You do not want to miss that. Stay right there. But before we get to Ambassador Nikki Haley, I want to talk to you about Allegiance Gold. You know how much I love Allegiance Gold. Why? Because it allows you to diversify your funding, right? It protects you and your family. It allows you to protect your 401k, your IRA with gold and silver. And they can also deliver it securely right to your front door. You can't beat that. Don't just trust me. Don't just trust Allegiance Gold. Find out why it's important for you to diversify your money and protect it. Go online, look it up. It's just that important. You saw what was happening in Canada under Justin Trudeau, especially when the truckers went to protest. I mean, I was there. I was watching it with my own eyes, and how Trudeau seized bank accounts, right? And wouldn't allow people to donate to where they wanted to donate to. So your money is not just yours, folks. People, governments, they can access it. I'm just saying, protect your money. And right now you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Yes. Don't wait. Call or click today. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, no H, or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or protectwithsara.com. I'm so happy, and it's such an honor to be joined by you, Governor Nikki Haley, or Ambassador Nikki Haley. Now, you told me I can just call you Nikki. I gave you
yes, those are moments in time.
Those are huge moments in time, Nikki. Huge moments in time, because you're for me. You're a hero. I think what you have done is remarkable. Your career has been remarkable. Your experience in foreign policy, and I'm a foreign journalist. I'm a foreign correspondent covering war zones. I think the work that you did at the UN was absolutely incredible, and you really held so many to account at the UN. And I pray to God we get someone like you in there again. And now you're running for president. So this is absolutely a moment in time, but a significant moment in time. Tell me how voters are responding to your message now and your record on the campaign trail.
Well, no one will outwork me on this. And thank you for having me on. We are in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina all the time. We are trying to really focus on what Americans want to see. There's a lot of issues in the world. I mean, we're $32 trillion in debt. I don't think our kids will ever forgive us for this. We're having to borrow money to make our interest payments. You look at education. I mean, as a mom, the idea that parents don't know what's being taught or said to their kids in the classroom is unthinkable. You look at the report cards, they're abysmal. You look at crime on the streets at an all-time high. You look at our completely open border that's irresponsible and dangerous to our national security. And then, you basically look at our national security as a whole. I mean, when America's distracted, the world is less safe. And so we're really talking about the things that real Americans care about. I was a 2-term governor that took a double-digit unemployment state and turned it into an economic powerhouse. So I know the domestic side of things. I was at the UN ambassador, at the UN. I negotiated not with one country, but with 193 countries. So I know the foreign policy side. It is time for us to get to an America that's strong and proud again. And that's what we're talking about. We feel really good about where we're at, and we're going to continue working hard until we finish this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to start with that. You started talking about the economy, and you're right. Our children are going to inherit, and our grandchildren, extraordinary amount of debt. And you're right, it is unforgivable. But we're also seeing our adversaries, right, take advantage of what they're seeing in the United States, both on the national level as well as the foreign policy level. China, for example, right now, we've seen that China has definitely built bridges with Lula in Brazil, asking to kick out the US dollar. We saw China with OPEC in Saudi Arabia, the Chinese Communist Party really moving across the globe. Now we see them, of course, in Cuba, threatening to set up military bases in Cuba, just right off the Florida shores. I don't think we've ever come this close since, John F. Kennedy Jr. and the Cuban Missile Crisis to having a very serious threat. And we've seen the Chinese government inside the United States purchasing land near our military bases, flying the balloon overhead. What is your assessment of how China is viewing the United States and viewing themselves as far as a future global power? And do we have the right to feel, nervous and a bit afraid of what that possibly means?
China, make no mistake. I mean, it's not being over dramatic to say that China is preparing for war with the U.S. in every aspect, whether it's economically, whether it's militarily, we're seeing everything that they're doing. They have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have more air defense systems than we do. They are much further along with hypersonic missiles. They just came out with the 5th generation fighter jet. And, how did they get it? By stealing our intellectual property. They've stolen $600 billion of intellectual property from us every year, and America's doing nothing about it. And the Chinese, President Xi basically said that any company that does business in China has to cooperate with the Chinese military. Look at our tech companies. Look at the fact that they have access to all of our financial data, all of our healthcare data, all of our military data. Now know the Chinese military has that. President Xi said, whoever owns the data rules the world. It is time for us to wake up. It is time for us to make sure that we start letting China know what we expect of them. We've got to build up our military and make it stronger. We've got to tell them that we are going to stop normal trade relations unless they quit sending the fentanyl over, which they know exactly what they're doing.
Right.
We have to make sure that we are calling them out on stealing intellectual property. We have to make sure that they know that we are going to finish this with Ukraine and Russia, because a win for Russia is a win for China. And that's why a win for Ukraine is a win for freedom. And we have to make sure that we're on to this. The problem is Biden and Harris are not doing anything. And now we've lost another 4 years in the process, and there is no time to waste.
You brought up so many great points there. I just want to hit them all, but I'm going to start off with Russia because that was the last point that you made. Seeing what has happened right now in Ukraine and Russia, especially with the Wagner Group, and they used to be, or they are, it's hard to gauge with all of the misinformation and disinformation out on the internet as well as in news. But the Wagner Group was like that was Putin's group, right? His private army, and they would do things. I mean, they're vicious. I know this from my husband and others who serve in the military. They go across the globe, and they are that buffer between, the Russian military and whatever they're doing, right? So the Russians are like, yeah, well, we didn't in Syria. That wasn't my decision. That was that private military organization that did that. It wasn't necessarily a Russian decision. We know that's a lie. But now that we see what has happened, and we saw the events unfold over the weekend, especially with the Wagner Group apparently turning on Putin and then taking a step back when Belarus got involved, what is your assessment of what that means, what this could mean for the future? Your best assessment based on your sourcing, I guess, and your resourcing when you from the UN. Is there anything that you can say about that?
Well, Russia was already in a bad place. I mean, we knew that. I mean, we knew that Putin was kind of spiraling down because he had hit rock bottom. He was getting drones from Iran. He's getting missiles from North Korea. They've raised the draft age in Russia to 65. A couple of weeks ago, they were pulling Russians off the streets, handing them shovels to fight with. So we knew it was bad. What we saw with the Wagner Group is fascinating in the fact that Putin created this monster. Right. Putin created and built the strength of the Wagner Group, and the monster came back to bite him. And so, while they have been doing work for the Russians in Syria and Africa, what we're now seeing is they suddenly not only called out Putin, but they called out Putin for the fact that Russians were dying. They called out Putin for the fact that this war shouldn't be happening. That's really important because when you have a lot of Russian parents that have watched their children die or seen their husbands die, this is a crack that needed to happen. What Biden should be doing right now is he should be on the phone with every one of our allies in Ukraine, making sure they have the equipment and ammunition to win. This is an opportunity. This is a very weak point for Putin, and we need to make sure we're making the most of it because this could be the start of a real serious crack in what has happened. And I think it's what we always thought, which is Putin was on shallow territory anyway. This just carried it over the finish line. And you look at how he responded in the fact that he came out with a very strong speech saying that, what this was and what was happening. And then the next thing you know, he makes a deal to get out of it. It showed more weakness, and it's an opportunity for us and our allies to show more strength in having the backs of Ukraine. We should be very loud right now in our support of Ukraine.
I think you brought up a really excellent point. I just returned from Israel, and one of the biggest points that stuck out, and I was with IDF, I was with Tom Homan, obviously, who was former Immigration and Customs Enforcement, director. And we were spending time going to all the different areas of the Israeli border because they've got to defend themselves. They're out there alone, surrounded by the enemy. But one of the most interesting facts was the 6-Day War. When they were bringing up the war, 1967, I believe. I'm gonna hold myself to that right now, unless I'm wrong. But during the 6-Day War, that they were on the edge. They were going to lose everything. And I was talking to folks about this that were there, that had fought, and they thought it's over for Israel. In fact, there were many calls going back and forth between the United States until the U.S. said, "We are going to back you at this point. We will back you." And as soon as the United States just started sending the weapons that were necessary, not necessarily, manpower resources, but the weapons that were necessary, it turned the whole war around. And Israel, by a miracle, was able to salvage itself and save itself with almost every nation on that battlefront in the Middle East just charging right at them. It was kind of an incredible moment in history. Do you think moments like that should be looked at similarly? I mean, these are two different countries, but the United States could provide those resources and end this quickly.
I love the correlation you make with that, because I think it's really, if you look at the fact that what did those two countries have in common? It wasn't that Israel got lucky. They had the passion to save their country. They wanted their freedoms. They wanted to have a place to call home, and they were willing to fight for it. You look at Ukraine, people gave them 5 days. They had the passion to save their country and fight for their freedom. So what did they do? The Ukrainians immediately went to the front lines. The women said, we're not going to stand back. They started making Molotov cocktails to help their husbands. They wanted to make sure they fought for their country. What you've seen with Ukraine is they have shown they have the passion and the will to win, just like the Israelis showed they had the passion and the will to win. So when you have that passion and that will, they do need support in having the equipment and the ammunition to finish that. That's why with Ukraine, we don't need to give cash to Ukraine. We don't need to put troops on the ground. What we need to do is make sure we work with our allies to give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. Biden was very slow on this. Don't forget, Russia surrounded Ukraine for a whole year prior, and nothing was done to prevent it. And the lesson in all of this is when dictators say they're going to do something, believe them. China said they were going to take Hong Kong. They did. Russia said they were going to move into Ukraine. We watched it. China says Taiwan is next. We better believe them. Russia's saying after Ukraine, it'll be Poland and the Baltics. If that happens, that's a world war. Our job is to prevent war. We should always be in the name of preventing war. And so by doing that, that's why we need to make sure we finish this with Ukraine. What started all of this, and none of this would have happened, was had we not had that debacle in Afghanistan. I mean, my husband is a military veteran. He served in Afghanistan. The idea that we left Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. So now China and Russia are just waiting us out. They think we're going to do it again. That's all the more reason why we need to see Ukraine through, because if Ukraine wins, it sends a message to China with Taiwan. It sends a message to North Korea testing ballistic missiles. It sends a message to Iran building a bomb. And we also should get in front of the situation on Taiwan. Send them equipment and ammunition now. Make sure we have a stronger naval presence on the Taiwan Strait now. That will prevent war with China and Taiwan. Those are the things we need to do.
Absolutely. You brought up two very important points. One, which was Afghanistan. And while you were talking about, the Wagner group, being the beast coming back to bite, the man that built him, right? It's kind of like his own Frankenstein, right? Coming back to build him. I was thinking about Pakistan and the Taliban and how the Taliban would sometimes turn on the Pakistani government. And that was always, they built the Taliban, built up the Haqqani group, thinking they were going to target India every single time. They would use them, they would come back and turn around and target them. And then, of course, us. And you're right. My husband also served, like your husband, in Afghanistan. And I believe that was the opening. With the Biden administration literally opened the door for all of these dictators to say, look what we can do now. We can see the weakness in America, not because America is weak, but because America has a weak leader. And part of that is the border right now. I bring this up because I think a lot of times Americans don't get the full news. Not from the media should be reporting on what is actually happening. We have a border now that is wide open. 1.7 million known gotaways. And the last estimates were that 135,000 Americans have died of fentanyl poisoning and addiction. But fentanyl poisoning, mainly from precursor chemicals that are coming from China, that are being, mixed by the cartels in these seedy factories and in apartments, even in here in the United States, putting poison out there that looks like Percocets, oxycodons. I tell everybody, don't take a pill unless a doctor has prescribed it for you. How dangerous.
Adderall.
Right. Adderall. Yes. And we have 3 people that were connected to our family, young people that have already died of this. And it is very, very dangerous times for our young people, very dangerous. And for all Americans, what can we do to stop this? You brought up fentanyl a few times. How do we fix this crisis at the border?
I think it's important for everyone to know exactly what's happening at the border. I didn't just go to the border and come back. I went 400 miles down that border. It is unthinkable what I saw. Outside of these ranches, mounds of clothes, mounds of shoes, paraphernalia, rape areas where women and girls have to walk through. Ranchers, when they get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if anyone died trying to cross their fence. They pick up whatever little kids were left behind and turn them over to Border Patrol. When I met with multiple sheriffs, they said before 7 a.m., they round up whatever illegal immigrants they can, turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their job, they said, you want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job. 5 million illegal immigrants. We've had enough fentanyl cross the border last year that would kill every single American. Number one cause of death of adults 18 to 49, fentanyl. And you're exactly right. Don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing. So what do we do about it? When I was governor, I passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country. We did a mandatory E-Verify program that required businesses to have to prove that every person they hired was in this country legally. We should defund sanctuary cities once and for all. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after Middle America, we need 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground, and we need to let them do their job. We need to go back to the remain in Mexico policy because nobody wants to remain in Mexico. We need to go back to the provisions of Title 42. And instead of catch and release, we should do catch and deport. That is what will stop the bleeding at the border. That is what will stop all of this lawlessness that's happening. We've got to get it under control. And when it comes to China sending that fentanyl over, we stop our normal trade practices with China until they stop killing Americans with fentanyl.
Thank you. Thank you so much. From a mother who is terrified every single day, like I'm sure you are, watching what's happening in our country. It's horrific. And there are solutions to it. I mean, and there are ways of putting our adversaries at bay and saying, we're not going to take this anymore from you. And I do agree with you on China. Let's just, if China wants to do business with the United States, it better stop killing our citizens. Guys, only a little bit longer before Sound of Freedom hits the theaters July 4th. In the United States, my friend Eduardo Verástegui is working diligently with others, including me. I haven't made a movie, but he has made a movie to educate you on the dangers of child trafficking and how dangerous that border is and what is happening to children, not only in Central America and Mexico, but right here in the United States. Every year, think about this, every year all across the globe, more than 2 million children are trafficked. Now, this new movie is going to raise the awareness that we need to this often unseen horror. Sound of Freedom from Angel Studios, same group that produced The Chosen, which I think was just phenomenal, will be released in theaters, theatrically released in the United States on the 4th of July. 4th of July, folks. We can make a difference. We can save lives. Purchase your tickets online. New theaters are added daily. I've just talked to people. I'm here in Key West with families. Task Force Dagger, love them so much, how they help our military families and everything. But I've talked to people here that are already buying tickets, people who've already purchased them, ready to watch the film. So I want you to watch it too. It will educate you on the more than 500,000 children a year that go missing in the United States alone. More than 50% of those victims are between the ages of 12 and 15. Can you believe that? 27% of human trafficking victims are children. We just can't bury our heads in the sand anymore, folks. We've got to do our job. Help spread this message worldwide. Sound of Freedom is coming to theaters July 4th. So buy your tickets today to reserve a spot opening week. If more theaters are sold out, guess what? It will help raise awareness of this issue that often goes unnoticed. Find a theater near you by visiting angel.com/freedom. That is angel.com/freedom. By supporting Sound of Freedom, you will contribute in raising awareness and propelling a movement to save millions of children around the world. Get your tickets today. Don't you want to do that at angel.com/freedom. That's angel.com/freedom. If you love interviews with the key players in the 2024 race, you're not going to want to miss the Sara Carter Show. Hit that subscribe button below here on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you. But there's another problem, and it's here in our country, and it's about American tax dollars that are being funneled through the UN. I'm sure you remember this. United Nations and USAID, they're funding NGOs. They're incentivizing like this dangerous illegal immigration to the southern border. And I'm a big supporter of different NGOs. I mean, I believe it. They're necessary in many cases, but we're also seeing an abuse. And the UN is highly politicized. I'm sure you know that, and weaponized in many ways. What can we do about that?
And when I was at the UN, I had a team together, and they basically watched every single thing China was doing. And we made a point to stop it before it started. We need to go, when it comes to our NGOs, have a group that just looks at what every single NGO is doing. We focused a lot on these, and these are groups that go and help in the name of human rights, but some are actually pretty dangerous. Some go and help terrorist activity. We see that all the time with Israeli, these NGOs like UNRWA, which basically was allowing for school textbooks to talk about killing Israelis. And, America's been supporting that. So there are multiple NGOs that do other things. You have to go in and literally look at every single one, what their mission is, what their goal is, and decide if American tax dollars should be going to that. We should not be giving money to NGOs just because, nor should we be giving to the UN if we know a certain NGO is getting that. And so those are things that you can do. You can look at it. That's the whole point of USAID. That's the whole point of us making sure that we have a State Department that watches where our money goes. That's the one thing as an accountant that I will do is let's look at every dollar we spend. Right now, we gave $50 billion last year in foreign aid. You want to know who we gave it to? We gave it to Pakistan that harbored terrorists that tried to kill our soldiers. We gave it to Iraq that has Iranian influence that says death to America every day. We gave it to Zimbabwe, that's the most anti-American African country there is. We gave it to Belarus, who's holding hands with Russia as they invade Ukraine. We gave money to communist Cuba, who we named a state sponsor of terrorism that now has a spy center with China. And the one that makes me sick to my stomach, we gave foreign aid to China. How weak do we look? When I am president, we will stop giving money to countries that hate America. We've got to start being smart about how we spend and strategic in how strong we are.
Absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. I mean, I've asked this question before. I've never had an answer that was that concise and that good and made that much sense. How much worse is the border crisis right now, do you think, because of the NGOs encouraging more illegal immigration? Because this is my theory, and I'm just going to, I believe what they're doing is making, like the Biden administration, making the human traffickers and the drug cartels the middlemen in moving people. And I've never felt more passionate in my life, Nikki, than I do now to stopping human trafficking and saving children's lives. Like what I've seen, like you've seen, is absolutely, I think, the most heartbreaking tragedies that most people will never witness, thank God. But seeing those children on the border, seeing them being trafficked in our country, do you think the responsibility falls on those that are allowing this to happen, that are actually aiding and abetting it instead of finding solutions?
The NGOs are so focused on data and numbers and quotas that they're not looking that there are people behind these numbers. And if you look, the cartels aren't just trafficking drugs, they're trafficking people. And when you see a man cross the border with a little child, that's only because they took that child from someone else because they know that a single man by himself would have a harder time getting across. Those are the things we need to look at. What's happening to those women in those rape areas? What's happening when those kids are being trafficked so that male adults can get across? Those are the questions we should be asking the NGOs. That's the accountability, not numbers, not quotas, not all the good that they say they're doing. Look at the faces behind these numbers. Look at the dangers behind these numbers and see if we're really doing harm or we're doing good. We know we're hurting the national security of Americans, but we're also hurting the health and security of these individuals attempting to come across. The cartels are making thousands of dollars on every single person just to bring them over. And they don't care what happens to them once they come over.
Okay, I'm going to leave the last and final questions up to you, but I do have just one more thing I want to say, and then I want to give you a moment to talk to your constituents, to talk to Americans who are confused and getting ready for 2024 and are done with the way the Biden administration has handled this. But the first part I'm going to ask you is, do you think the Biden administration has literally put Americans at risk through its foreign policy? And if you become president of these United States, how can America earn back that trust of our allies again?
I think that we've lost a lot during the Biden administration. I think it started with Afghanistan and it's only gone downhill from there. And I think that countries are paying attention. I've always said when America is distracted, the world is less safe. And we see that playing all the way around. We have to be strong again, and we have to get control of that. You know, when I went to the United Nations, I wanted countries to know what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. That's what we'll do again when I'm president. We have to bring that respect back, because when America acts, the world follows. When America speaks, the world listens. Who we are, the world wants to be, but we have to get back to who we are. You know, I'll leave you with this. A few days ago, I dropped my husband off at 4 a.m. for another year-long deployment. And I watched him and 230 of his military brothers and sisters pick up their 2 duffel bags to get ready to board a bus to go to a country they have never been, in the name of defending our freedoms and protecting America. They don't care about this political chaos that's going on in America. What they care about is defending the country we love so much. We owe it to them to get this right. We owe it to them to let them know that if they're going to sacrifice their lives and their families from seeing them for a year, we need to at least start being serious about the role we're going to take in our country and how it's handled in the world abroad. And, you know, someone asked me recently why I was running. And I said, my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. I'm doing this for my husband, Michael, and his military brothers and sisters, because they need to know their sacrifice means something, that we do love our country. I'm doing this for my daughter who just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. And I'm doing this for my son who's going to be a senior in college, and I've watched him write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That's not us. That's not America. And for the first time, 78% of Americans have said they don't think their kids are going to have as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We've got a country to save. And so what I'd ask all of you to do is join me. Go to NikkiHaley.com. We can make America strong and proud again. We can get this done if we all commit and say the time is now for a new, younger generation that's going to leave the drama, negativity, and chaos of the past and start focusing on new solutions of the future. I know that our best days are to come. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for for coming on the show. And everybody go to NikkiHaley.com. Go to NikkiHaley.com. Listen, it's about getting involved. We are in charge if we let it be. If we do what our founding fathers set out for us to do, we are the bosses. We're going to put people in office, people that actually care. You just heard Nikki Haley. That was amazing. My gosh, I hope you come back on the show. There's so much I would love to talk to you about in the future. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. Well, folks, this was a very special episode of the Sara Carter Show. I hope to bring on other presidential candidates. They could just lay out their platform, let you decide for yourself. I mean, what you think about them. I've got to say a big, huge thank you to Nikki Haley, to Ambassador Nikki Haley, for all of the dedication and work she has given in her life to helping our nation and our planet be better, and so much work that we still have to do. Listen to what she's saying. It is up to each and every one of us. We can make this difference, right? We can change things if we work hard enough, smart enough, and we stop fighting each other. Remember, our adversaries like China, just like Nikki Haley said, and others are watching us. And when we see a house divided, boy, we know our enemies are watching too. And when they see a house divided, they find a reason to attack. China is a direct threat. Russia is a threat. We need to be thinking smart, and we need to listen to other people's ideas without tearing each other apart. This is the United States of America, folks, and we have an election in 2024, and we can turn things around. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless Ambassador Nikki Haley and all of our presidential candidates. And God bless the great state of Texas.